What makes a genius? Is an IQ score, a flash of inspiration, or a lifelong dance with curiosity? Richard Feynman was no ordinary scientist. He was the man who cracked open the atom, played the bongos at night, and taught physics like a magician performing miracles. He helped build the atomic bomb, and then spent his life trying to understand not just the universe, but humanity itself. This is the story of genius, the life and science of Richard Feynman by James Gleick, a breathtaking journey through the mind of one of the most original thinkers of the 20th century. Prologue, the birth of a revolutionary mind. In 1948, 27 physicists gathered in the Pocono Mountains, uncertain of how to mend the broken theory of quantum mechanics. Among them was a young, fast-talking, unorthodox physicist named Richard Feynman. While the world still reeled from the shadow of Hiroshima, Feynman was already dreaming beyond destruction, into the fabric of existence itself. He stood before legends like Niels Bohr, Enrico Fermi, and Paul Dirac, nervously sketching diagrams of particles traveling through time. His ideas sounded absurd until they weren't. Those squiggly chalk lines, later known as Feynman diagrams, would change physics forever. Feynman's genius wasn't just in solving equations, it was in seeing them. He didn't simply calculate reality. He visualized it dancing before his eyes. Chapter 1. Far Rockaway, the making of a curious mind. Every legend starts with a child staring at the world in wonder. For Richard Feynman, that wonder began in the seaside neighborhood of Far Rockaway, New York. It was a modest place, wooden houses, sandy air, the smell of the ocean always nearby. But for young Richard, it was a laboratory. He built his first radio with scraps and coils he scavenged from the neighborhood, wired his bedroom with electric circuits, and created a personal science lab from discarded parts. His curiosity wasn't gentle, it was explosive. Once, he overloaded a rheostat until it burned, proudly dangling the smoking device out of the window so it wouldn't fill the house with fumes. His father, Melville Feynman, was not a scientist, but he had the mind of one. Every evening walk, every dinner conversation became a lesson in how to see the world. He'd flip over stones and point out ants, asking Richard to imagine what the world looked like through their eyes. When Richard asked why a ball rolled to the back of his toy wagon when he pulled it forward, Melville said, "That's called inertia," but nobody knows why. It was a powerful lesson. Science isn't about having the right answers. It's about daring to ask the right questions. Melville taught his son that naming something wasn't the same as understanding it. Knowing the term brown-throated thrush didn't tell you anything about how it flies, sings, or lives. Richard carried this principle into his career, becoming a lifelong enemy of shallow explanations. At night, he tuned into distant radio stations, amazed that invisible waves could bring voices and music from hundreds of miles away. The young boy who marveled at the magic of a radio would grow into the man who explained the magic of the universe. Far Rockaway shaped his character in other ways too. It was a tight-knit Jewish community where education, honesty, and curiosity were sacred values. His mother, Lucille, balanced Melville's logic with humor and storytelling. Together, they nurtured not only his intellect, but also his imagination. When his baby brother died of illness, it taught him a cruel but important truth about life's fragility, a truth that later shaped his fierce appetite for living and learning. Chapter 2. MIT, Learning to Think Differently. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Feynman entered a world of brilliance. Yet he quickly realized that knowledge wasn't enough. Thinking differently was what mattered. While other students memorized formulas, Feynman took them apart to see how they worked. His notebooks weren't tidy equations. They were alive with sketches, ideas, and wild experiments. He was blunt, confident, and sometimes irreverent. When a professor posed a question, Feynman would solve it faster on his own and then suggest a simpler method. But it wasn't arrogance, it was play. For him, physics was a game of discovery. He once said, "What I cannot create, I do not understand." This mindset turned him into one of the most creative scientific minds of his time. At MIT, Feynman wasn't content just to study established physics. He began inventing his own way of looking at the world, through intuition and pictures rather than abstract symbols. He learned how to make sense of the invisible, turning mathematical noise into visual clarity. His professors soon realized that his brain worked in a language that even they couldn't always follow. Yet, despite his brilliance, Feynman was unpretentious. He played drums, cracked jokes, and relished simple pleasures. Science, for him, wasn't a career, it was a form of joy. MIT was where Feynman learned the true meaning of independence. He didn't want to rely on authority, textbooks, or prestige. He trusted his own reasoning. That fierce intellectual independence would later become both his greatest strength and his most defining trait. Chapter 3. Princeton, a genius among giants. By the time Feynman reached Princeton University, he was no longer just a talented student. He was a phenomenon. Princeton was a world filled with brilliant minds, from Albert Einstein to John Wheeler, and Feynman fit right in, though not quietly. He brought energy, mischief, and a New York accent that cut through the genteel halls of academia. At Princeton, Feynman tackled one of the most complex puzzles in science: how light interacts with matter. The theory of quantum electrodynamics, QED, was a mess, filled with infinities and contradictions. Most physicists couldn't make sense of it, but Feynman approached it differently. He visualized particles bouncing, twisting, and looping through time itself. Out of this imaginative chaos came the foundation for the famous Feynman diagrams, a revolutionary way of representing subatomic interactions. Yet, Princeton was also a time of heartbreak. His wife, Arlene, the love of his life, was dying of tuberculosis. She was confined to a hospital while he threw himself into work, visiting her whenever he could. Their letters, playful, tender, and full of humor, revealed the humanity beneath his scientific mind. When she passed away, he was devastated. But even in his grief, he found solace in the idea that the universe continued, its patterns, its beauty, its endless dance of particles and energy. Out of pain, he found purpose. His mind, restless and brilliant, sought to find order in the chaos both of nature and of life. Chapter 4. Los Alamos, the Bomb and the Burden. When World War II erupted, science was called to serve. Feynman was recruited to a secret city in the New Mexico desert, Los Alamos. It was a place unlike any other, a fortress of secrecy where the brightest minds worked together to build the atomic bomb. Feynman was young, exuberant, and fearless. Surrounded by legends like Oppenheimer, Teller, and Beta, he quickly made a name for himself as the man who could solve problems no one else could. His approach was intuitive, almost playful, and his energy infectious. But he never lost his mischievous streak. He picked locks to expose security flaws, cracked safes full of classified documents, and even used his pranks to teach lessons about honesty and curiosity. But beneath the humor was a moral struggle. When the bomb exploded at Trinity, Feynman watched from the desert hills, awestruck by its light and terrified by its meaning. The fireball lit up the dawn, and something darkened inside him. He realized that his brilliance had helped unleash a power capable of erasing cities. After the war, he would never see science the same way. The joy of discovery had collided with the horror of destruction. He returned to civilian life with a mix of pride and guilt, a genius who had seen both the beauty and the danger of human curiosity. The bomb had changed the world, and it had changed Richard Feynman forever. Chapter 5. Cornell, Rediscovering Wonder. After the war, Feynman arrived at Cornell University a broken man. The laughter that once filled his conversations was gone. He was haunted by memories of Arlene's death and by the sight of the atomic explosion that had shaken the desert sky. Though the world now hailed him as a hero of science, Feynman felt hollow. He couldn't find meaning in equations or experiments. The war had shown him the darkest side of human ingenuity, and he wondered if knowledge itself could ever be innocent again. At Cornell, His brilliance was unquestioned. Yet, he would sit in his office for hours, unable to work, staring blankly at equations that refused to come alive. The fun was gone. His mind, once bursting with ideas, felt empty. But one day, something small, something ordinary, pulled him out of his despair. In the cafeteria, he watched a student toss a plate into the air. The red Cornell logo on the plate spun faster than the plate itself. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Feynman did. That spinning plate awakened something inside him. He began calculating its motion, scribbling equations on napkins. The more he worked, the more he smiled. It was the first time in months that he had felt the joy of discovery. The plate became a metaphor for his life. Simple, chaotic, and strangely beautiful. That small moment of curiosity rekindled his love for physics. Soon after, his mind began producing ideas at a furious pace. He developed new insights into quantum electrodynamics, building on the intuitive diagrams he had imagined years before. Collaborating with Freeman Dyson, he helped turn those ideas into a consistent, testable framework. What had begun as an idle fascination with a spinning plate eventually became part of the theory that would win him the Nobel Prize. Cornell was more than a return to science. It was a return to wonder. The man who had built a bomb rediscovered the pure joy of asking questions. Feynman realized that the universe didn't owe him meaning. He had to find it himself, in curiosity, in beauty, in play. Chapter 6, Caltech, the Great Teacher. If Cornell had revived Feynman's curiosity, Caltech gave him a stage to share it with the world. When he joined the California Institute of Technology, he found his true calling, not just as a scientist, but as a teacher and storyteller. His lectures weren't quiet lessons in theory, they were performances. He moved, joked, and painted pictures in the air with chalk. Students didn't just learn physics from him, they felt it. In 1961, Caltech asked him to redesign its entire introductory physics course. Feynman took on the challenge, and what emerged became legendary: the Feynman Lectures on Physics. These talks were unlike anything academia had seen. Instead of starting with formulas, Feynman began with questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do magnets attract? Why does light bend? He believed that if you couldn't explain something simply, you didn't truly understand it. He wasn't interested in prestige or titles. He refused honors, declined invitations, and often avoided anything that smelled of ceremony. What thrilled him most was discovery, and the look on a student's face when something suddenly made sense. If you can't explain it to a freshman, he said, you haven't really understood it yourself. At Caltech, Feynman's interests exploded beyond physics. He studied biology, art, and even taught himself to draw and play the drums. He explored nanotechnology before the term existed and speculated about machines that could manipulate matter at the atomic scale. His curiosity knew no bounds. He lived with the same intensity he brought to science, laughing loudly, dancing freely, and questioning everything. And yet, beneath the exuberance, there was always humility. Feynman knew that no theory, no law, no idea could ever capture the full mystery of the universe. I was born not knowing, he said, and have only had a little time to change that here and there. That was the essence of his teaching, the joy of not knowing, the excitement of discovery, and the courage to stay curious. Chapter 7, The Legend Lives On. By the 1970s and 80s, Richard Feynman was more than a physicist. He was a cultural phenomenon. His lectures, packed with energy and humor, attracted not just scientists but artists, philosophers, and ordinary people who were simply curious about how the world worked. He became a bridge between the mysteries of the universe and the everyday human experience. Then came the books that turned him into a household name. Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. And what do you care what other people think? Weren't just collections of anecdotes. They were windows into a way of life defined by curiosity and authenticity. In these stories, readers met the real Feynman, the safecracker, the prankster, the artist, the rebel, the eternal student. Feynman also became a public voice for scientific integrity. During the investigation of the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, He famously demonstrated the flaw that caused the tragedy by dropping a piece of O-ring rubber into a glass of ice water, showing how it became brittle in the cold. While bureaucrats hid behind technical jargon, Feynman exposed the truth with simplicity and courage. His actions reminded the world that science is not about authority, it's about honesty. As illness began to consume his body, Feynman refused to surrender to despair. He lived each day with the same mischievous energy that had defined his life. Even in his hospital bed, he joked with nurses and sketched ideas. When the end came in 1988, he faced it with humor and defiance. His final words were, "This dying is boring." But his ideas didn't die with him. His influence continues to ripple through science, education, and philosophy. He showed the world that genius isn't about knowing everything. It's about embracing uncertainty with joy. To be a genius, Feynman proved, is not to have all the answers, but to never stop asking the questions that matter. What means to be a genius? Richard Feynman's life wasn't about being smarter than others. It was about seeing differently. He didn't chase perfection. He chased understanding. He taught the world that science is not a cold pursuit of facts, but a celebration of curiosity, doubt, and imagination. James Gleick's genius reminds us that behind every discovery is a dreamer, a rebel, a storyteller. And that perhaps genius isn't something you're born with, it's something you live one question at a time.